Hey, folks! It's another delicious Sunday afternoon to evening. I hope you're all doing well. I'm going to start this off with a new thing I've decided to do, which is to confess without irony and legit and without any sort of reservation that Jesus is the Christ and God raised him from the dead. And I hope our watchers can agree with that statement. I'm joined with those crew of the Jupiter Anthology who has deigned to join us. First and foremost is Lou Antonelli, who sadly cannot speak very well today, but I will be speaking for him. He says hello. Not even any punctuation, so I assume it's perfectly neutral. Richard, I wonder if you would introduce yourself next.
Well, I'm Richard Paulinelli, and I, like everybody else, have a story in the Jupiter Anthology, and I look forward to talking to you guys about it today.
Excellent. Go for it, Mrs. Freeman.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it's my turn. Hi, I'm A.M. Freeman. I also have a story in the Jupiter Anthology, and so I'm here to talk about it.
Lou also says, greetings from deepest, darkest East Texas. I can't imagine, especially around Houston or Austin. Well, that's probably more central Texas. So, Richard, you did mention your story. How about I let you go first?
Okay, well, my story is Icarus Falls, and looking at the table of contents when the book came out, I think it's probably the longest story in the collection, and I apologize to all the other authors for taking up that much space. I didn't realize it was quite that big, but there was a lot to set up in it and a lot to tell in it, and it follows a theme that I've got in all of my stories I've submitted to the anthologies that Superversive Press is putting together. Is a one human being in an isolated situation, and they have to work out a problem, or they're dealing with a crisis like in this one, where we have an astronaut on what is supposed to be his final mission, finds himself trapped in orbit with realistically no way to get back home because an accident has raised a nice barrier of debris that no ship can get through. So that's the premise for Icarus Falls.
Outstanding. Let's see here. Go for it.
Me again?
Yeah.
Okay, so my story I originally wrote as a King Arthur story, but it's from the perspective of a servant of the King Lot. And when the Jupiter Anthology was coming out, I had that story sitting there because it wasn't accepted for the thing I'd submitted it to before. So I decided, let me take it. It's got all the right themes, kind of power and authority that Jupiter has, because it's about the two, like King Lot and King Arthur, being kind of a tug of war of power, or more importantly, how they treat their power and how it affects the people below them. So I decided I could take that story and put it on the moons of Jupiter to make it fit more in the setting. And so that's basically the story. And it's about a man who, from witnessing and experiencing the different types of power, makes him a better man and makes him a better father. And he has to, he discovers what this King Arthur kid is about, and then it makes him realize that he's got to change and tries to figure out a way to rescue his family from the spot that they've been at for so long.
Outstanding. And Lou Antonelli's Luke Antoine III's story is called The Jupiter Ghost Bots. And it's looks to be like I've got a lot to read, and John C. Wright just released a new book. You guys have to forgive me, but it looks like he wrote a horror story about a woman going up to a abandoned Jupiter station to sort of check it out. I see holograms are pulling guns on people and is treated like a real threat. I think that's quite fascinating. And as it goes on, I'm sure that as it is connected to Jupiter, that it would be quite entertaining indeed. But there's, of course, a question. What is the Jupiter Anthology about? I've talked to the authors. I've brought them on board. They've discussed their stories, and here's what the introduction says. I don't, and this is by the way, the editor, uh, Julie A. Pascal, who I had the pleasure of meeting in Chattanooga, but sadly hasn't joined us yet. She says, I'd always viewed Jupiter as a somewhat tidied up version of Zeus. And indeed, when I began to research the fellow, most links sent me back to the Greek god, rather than the Roman deity. Authority, leadership, fatherhood. None of those things are tidy. In fact, they're often the opposite. I found myself most entranced by stories where motivations were suspect and leadership unappreciated or misunderstood. I like the stories where leadership didn't come naturally, but the protagonist had to find that leadership in him or herself. The father who had to work to be a worthy father, the person who stepped forward simply because no one else did, even the fellow who saved the world by accident. And I'm sure all these stories will certainly excite the imagination and bring forth those fonts of wonder, excitement, and so on that we'd expect after such a after the largest planet. Richard, what inspired your story?
Well, mine was basically what choice would you make if you were in the situation that I put my main character in, which is you're stuck in orbit. You cannot come home. Your choices are to just dive into the muck that's around the planet and let the collision wipe you out, or you could go back in his case to a deserted moon base and spend, they were estimating, up to 20 years before the debris field would clear enough where they could get a ship back off the surface of Earth and out to space. So you've got 20 years of isolation on the moon. Or do you just say, you know what, I'm going to break orbit and just aim in a general direction and see how far I go before, my time comes. So that's the choice that my main character is put in, is, what is he going to do? And there are other characters who are given choices to make and decisions that will alter their life connected to this accident. And we kind of see, what different people in that same situation, the different choices and why they make those choices. So I just wanted to, I have this bad habit of putting my characters into these terrible situations just to see what they would do to get out of them or to deal with them. And that was kind of what I did with this story. And it, as a Superversive story should have, it has a uplifting ending. But there's some grief, there's some tragedy, and there are some choices that, maybe we don't think we would make in that situation, but until we're in that situation, we honestly don't know. Each person's going to react differently. And I tried to get that with everybody in the mix and in the story. So you got a little bit of what it would be like if they had done this, or if they had done that, or if they had done this instead. So that was just basically why I wanted to write the story, and just kind of go with it and see what happens.
How did you tie in the themes of fatherhood, leadership, and authority?
Well, you've got the main character is kind of, he's the authority figure in this, in that he designed the spaceship, he designed the base on the moon. He's not even supposed to be on this mission, but because of public relations, the president has called the head of NASA and said, I want this guy there for just the PR. And so they changed things around, and he's going on this flight that he really doesn't want to go on. He wanted his subordinate to have the honor of being the engineer that signed off that said the station could open, and that was taken away. And so he's not happy that this has happened, but it's his job, and he goes up there. And there's different points in the story where once the emergency is taking place, he basically takes the lead, because he's the one that's up there. He's the one in the soup. He's the one who's got to figure out what he's going to do. And as much as everybody on the ground wants to tell him, well, do this, do that, it impacts him, and he's the one who's going to make the call. And you kind of see him take command of his destiny toward the end of the story.
Excellent. I can see it now. Oh my goodness. Mad Cow. How you said that you have said in previous live streams that all your stories are connected. How have you connected this one to the rest of your stories? And I'll pose you the same question. How have you tied in the themes?
Okay, let's see. So let me think a second, because I have a lot of stories that are tied in, as you said. I believe Jupiter. Oh gosh, hang on. I'll get back to that one. I'll have to think in the back of my head how I tied that in. I know one of the descendants, maybe it was from Saturn. The descendants of Saturn went to Jupiter. I'd have to remember. Or no. Maybe it was the ones from Pluto. I can't tell you exactly. Some of the stories I've managed to link a little bit more, like the Neptune story. There's a journal that the boy writes in, and that journal later turns up in the a couple centuries later in the Mercury story. I'd have to go back on my timeline to remember exactly like which order I had it in. Oh wait, I think it was Saturn. The lady on Saturn, her brother went to Jupiter. That may be what it is. It's a little bit confusing. As a general rundown for anyone that's not familiar, I have a long timeline, and I have the descendants of Alan Shepard as my protagonist, and occasionally the descendants of Yuri Gagarin will be the protagonist. And so I kind of have years and centuries are between them, and it's different kind of generations. But I kind of at least know in the back of my mind. Well, I have it written down on a piece of paper. It's not always at the front of my mind, but the descendants jump around, and sometimes there's little Easter eggs. But as far as the story itself and what inspired it and how did I tie it in? Those were the two questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's see. So I believe what inspired me was to look at authority from a different angle. I think I touched on it when I introduced my story, but seeing how the way someone uses their authority affects the people below them. So in my story, the father, he's used to the knights or the guard, the people of Lot's kingdom, like always pushing him around, coming and being like, here, clean our motorbikes or do this, or you're just kind of kicked around, like you will take your food rations if you mess up just a little bit. And because of that interaction, the way he sees fatherhood is affected by that. So he's rather curt to his wife and child. And because he doesn't he just does it because he doesn't really know any other way. And he's hurt by the people that are hurting him. So he just kind of shuts off most of the time. And so when he experiences the authority and the way that it's used by Arthur is when he realizes like, oh, wow, being in a position of power doesn't mean that you force everyone to do what you want. It means that you serve the people that you are governing and helping. And so that makes him have to look at himself and be like, wow, I've really sucked. I didn't know how to do this, but now I do. So I'm going to go help my family now. So that's kind of, I think that ties in pretty well from both sides, especially it is a big character development for him. So that's kind of what it inspired me, was looking at authority from the people that are under the authority, and father learning how to be a better father.
Absolutely. And I've asked Lou Antonelli in the chat to type in how he's connected the themes and whatnot. Just an interesting tip. Oh, what? I thought he was going to say something. I could have sworn I heard something. Uh, anyway, to do it, let's see. I've lost my train of thought. Of course I have. So, Richard, you've applied for the uh, Soul Anthology, which will be done last.
Mhm.
You've also applied to others. What can we look forward to for various uh, unless I swear I've heard Lou say something.
I'm hearing a blip sound, and I don't know where it's coming from.
Okay. That's good. That's good. The meds are working.
Just the blue.
Do you want me to go ahead and just
Yeah.
kind of go with it? And we'll see?
Yeah. What else have you got for us for the Planetary?
Well, I was in Earth, which is out,
Mhm.
and the story was Extinction Point. And like I mentioned earlier, my overriding theme throughout all of my submissions is going to be, one human being in a situation and how they deal with being that way. In Earth, it's Extinction Point, and it's funny. I didn't copy this from A.M. Freeman, but in Extinction Point, it is a descendant of Neil Armstrong who goes off in a test flight that stops off temporarily at Pluto, but he winds up finding an alien civilization that has gone extinct, and he discovers that each planet, each society reaches a point where its technology destroys it. And the Earth that he had left behind was coming up to that point. So he is now racing back and trying to warn them before it's too late. And I'm not going to give spoilers, but that story's there. I'm editing Pluto, which AM is in as well, with a really good story called The Case for Pluto. And I've got it's the only story of mine that doesn't have the last human theme going, because it's more of a kind of fun poke at the people who say Pluto isn't a planet. So my little 2,000 word entry is more of a long joke than anything else. But I have
some stories are like that. Did most people take that route where they're like, oh, we're doing a Pluto anthology, we got to say something about Pluto being a planet?
Yeah, I think so. There's quite there's some serious stories in there, but there's a few where everybody kind of makes the point. Hey, this is a planet. Come on, guys.
Mine literally makes the case as it is a courtroom scene.
It did. It's very good.
Oh, it's really fun to research.
I'm looking at my submissions. I'm trying to see. I'm one of those weird people that keeps everything organized. So I've submitted to Sol, which is the last one, and that's at Homeworld's End. I haven't heard back on it yet, but that one deals with millions of years in the future, where the sun is swelling as it's dying, and it's about to reach the Earth itself. So the Earth is in its final days, and there's one human being who has decided that he or she, I don't really say if it's a man or a woman, is going to write it out with it. This person feels that it should be at least one human being on the planet when it goes, even though the human race is taken off into the galaxy and spread out far and wide. I'm in Dark Luna with Polar Shift, and that's one person who has survived the shifting of the poles. As far as he knows, he's the only one. And it kind of goes, it follows him as he kind of works and comes to grips with being the last human being. He kind of gets to the edge of lunacy, which is why this story got moved over to Dark Luna. But I think it has a nice ending. And then I've submitted to Uranus and to Neptune. And they both are, again, it's a single human being in a situation where, as far as they know, they're the last surviving member of the race. So yeah, I'm eager to hear back on some of them, because I haven't heard if they've been accepted or not. And I'm really eager to see Pluto come out, because I've edited that one, and we got so many great stories. It was really hard for me to to cut the ones that we did. I mean, we've jammed 21 stories into this, and there was another 20 that I would have loved to have run. You know, it was just that good.
It's always
And
anthologies.
I assure you, with the Soul Anthology, my general policy, unless it is unsalvageable, anyone who joins the Soul Anthology will probably get in, because I wish my anthology to have 98% of the mass of the other Soul anthologies.
There you go. Well, if that one's in,
Hmm?
then you've read At Home World's End, then, and you know how that one goes. And
So
it was kind of inspired by, of all people, I think it was an H.G. Was it no? It was either H.G. Wells or Doyle, where they were in an anthology that was written over 100 years ago that dealt with the end of the world. And they, you know, the Victorians had a very odd way of looking at how the world would come to an end, you know, in the realm of science fiction at the time. And so that story kind of got inspired by what some of the stories I've read in that. So that it's a neat little story, and I hope everybody enjoys reading it.
I will
put a
say, so I will say, if your descendant had been Alan Shepard instead of Neil Armstrong in the Earth Anthology, it would have been awkward because the Earth Anthology story is like the first in my timeline, so that's where it's like specifically says the descendants of Alan Shepard and Yuri Gagarin are like racing to Mars, and so I think we both had the descendants of
Yeah.
Alan Shepard. It may have been a bit awkward.
Well, I went with Armstrong only because the character's name came to me as Armstrong. I went, well, as long as I got Armstrong, why don't I make him one of Neil's great whatevers, you know?
Yeah.
And it kind of gave a connection to, you know, it would be natural. Here is this guy is going to be the first human being to leave our solar system. And it just seemed natural to tie him to the first human being to step foot on the moon.
I think that works really well for the Earth Anthology since it's about like humans doing human stuff and reaching out. So connecting to our past people that have done that works pretty well.
Now we're joined by Julie Pascal. How are you doing today, Julie?
I'm doing fine. I apologize for rearranging my office. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. You were the editor for Soul. I mean, oh my goodness. I am the editor for Soul. I do not have identity disorders at all. So you were the editor for Planetary Anthology Jupiter, Volume 5 in a sadly unawarded but much enjoyed series. How did you go about going through this and choosing the participants?
It was actually very difficult. I wanted to make sure that let me think about this for a moment.
How about an easier one? What was your favorite of the stories?
Oh goodness. Well, I did like Jeb's story very much. And what I liked about it, the anthology led off with his story Sunward. And what I enjoyed about it was the feeling of alienness to the situation and the people in it. And it had, for me, it had that sense of wonder that science fiction sometimes lacks these days.
Mm-hmm.
So I did enjoy his story very, very much. And of course, they're all wonderful.
Oh, yes.
And when I began, I thought, I want, you know, a variety of things. And I did end up with science fiction and fantasy and urban fantasy, you know, contemporary stories. And, you know, halfway through, I was in an enormous panic because I thought that was a horrible idea. But I think it worked out.
I absolutely agree with you. It was it sold quite well. I think we have the least of this copy of anthologies of all the copies I brought back from LibertyCon, which are sitting on top of my writing desk, which is fine. This is all fine. I wasn't doing work anyway. That's the important thing. So when it comes down to the editing, there's a bit of a gap because our cover artist kind of had to disappear for a bit due to real life coming in there with a what's that one thing the Victorians used to knock people out? A kosh. There we go. A ball bearing kosh knocked him out, dragged him off a bit, and we have only now freed him from his captors. Let's see here. Lou Antonelli said a couple things. When Julie was open from submissions, I pulled my story from the trunk and she liked it. Excellent. The protagonists fight authority and then they are reconciled because they were right in the first place. I guess they are the authority. The sense of wonder in SF today is more like, I wonder what's this politically correct bullshit I'm reading right now. And I absolutely
Don't hold
agree.
back, Lou. Just come out and say what you mean, buddy.
Right. What did he mean by this? What's the metaphor here? No, but how did you go about with the timeline and all that jazz, keeping everything together?
What, me?
Yes.
Keeping it. I'm not really sure what you mean by the timeline.
Well, just with the time spent and all that jazz. Like, I always like asking people who put things together, like what their methods were. What's the nuts and bolts? How did you cook the meat that you put into the chili? That's this anthology. I'm also a little hungry.
Okay. I learned a lot. And most of what I learned in the process. So it's kind of, I can't say this is what I did with Jupiter. It's like, this is what I should have done and this is what I learned. I think that when you're bringing in stories from people having a very organized way of keeping track of everything has got to be the hardest thing. And I have, if I sat down and I wrote it all out, I would definitely set up a little bit differently from the beginning if I did something like this again, definitely. And I really didn't have any experience with how to expect stories to come in.
Mm-hmm.
So there were lots of moments of panic, like, oh no, I'm not going to get any stories. And then it was, oh no, what am I going to do? I have a lot. And so I did end up choosing, and there were some very good stories that didn't make it in the volume. And I really hope that the authors don't give up on them. They either really didn't fit, or I just had to limit it. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the ones that didn't fit, and I don't remember who wrote it, but it was really good. It was a little bit downer on the end. It was a little bit literary. Was about uploading your self into a computer instead of dying, and somebody had decided to do this, and they uploaded themselves, and it was really well done and very, very heartbreaking, because the person who did this basically lost himself anyway. And
Mm-hmm.
and I really hope that whoever that author is, that they don't give up on that story and send it out and get it in something else, because that was a good one.
Julie, that was one thing I noticed with Pluto as I was going through is I don't think I got a bad story, but no. I got several that just didn't fit what we were doing. There was one that I liked, but it was so dark. I mean, it just wasn't what we needed for the anthology. And I hope that the authors that I wound up rejecting, believe me when I say your story was good, it just didn't make the cut. But please, try to find somewhere else to get this to fit because it's a good story. And that was the toughest thing to do.
That's the biggest thing for like new authors or people first sending out stuff to understand is a lot of times it just doesn't fit. Sometimes it may not just work, may not fit. Sometimes you need to work on it a little bit more. I know with the anthologies that I've done, there's been one or two that almost fit, and we were able to be like, hey, if you change like a few things here, it'll work. But other times, I did get some bad ones in the two that I've done, the Impossible Hope and Venus. There were some really like weird or bad ones, but for the most part, it's either you don't have room or it just doesn't quite fit what you're doing.
Yep, I've been. I joke that I'll accept anything and everything, but I do expect things to be somehow connected in some fashion. Even metaphorically to soul. In that sort of vein of ideas, because this is kind of your show, Julie. What was your vision going into this? Like, you're young, you're naive, you're full of vinegar. Beating off Victorian courtiers with a stick. How did you go into this? And like, what was your vision coming out? And did you meet that vision?
I think ultimately what I was hoping for worked. I really liked the idea of Jupiter as an idea, just as the concept, as the metaphor, even as the god of Zeus. And I really wanted to explore a broad, like I said, I had this idea that I wanted, I wanted stories about the mythology and about space and just coming at the idea of leadership and fatherhood and authority from lots of different angles. And like I said, then I kind of got really panicked because I thought, how can I put those together in one thing? Because a lot of the stories, the theme is not super in your face. I wanted it to be there, but it wasn't always really obvious. And I got an idea. Somebody had posted on a blog that I read, had posted a little short poem about Mars, and it was really funny. And I thought, well, I'm going to ask this guy if he'll send me poetry. And I don't know if anybody else put poetry in their anthologies, but I believe Robert Wesson is his name. I came prepared. Yeah, notes. And he sent me several short pieces that were, I thought, a lot of fun and interesting. And I arranged the anthology then kind of by what sort of story it is. So the ones with a lot of a feeling of an alien world or aliens were together, and then I put one of Mr. Wesson's stories in there, and then are his short bits to just kind of indicate to everybody that we're changing mode now, and the stories in the middle are going to be in a different kind of group, and then another bit by Robert, and I think that worked. So, and I really did like his little bits, lots of humor in them.
I saw the one that was a sitcom involving Kronos and Rhea. Is that right? I think it is.
I believe
yes.
So. And the kids.
Yep.
Yeah, there's no lack of drama in Greek or Roman mythology.
Sure. I actually have a short poem by Robert Wenson that was put in the anthology, and with your permission, I would like to read it out.
Absolutely.
It's called "The Wretched Fate of Frankenstein" by Robert Wenson. Ah, wretched was the fate of Frankenstein, who, madly driven by too prideful learning, fathered a creature monstrous and malign. Frankenstein, pure was my heart and noble my design, to benefit mankind its plaudits earning. Why, wretched then the fate of Frankenstein. Creature, high was thy aim, thy practice less fine, laborious yet strange, undiscerning, thy creature monstrous, though not yet malign. Frankenstein, opening thy eyes, thou opened mine, paternal love to dreadful loathing turning, then wretched was the fate of Frankenstein. Creature, my love and duty were forever thine, thou fleddest thy child's love and duty spurning, thinking thy creature monstrous and malign. Frankenstein, thy talk of love is mockery, condign it were to wish thy filthy carcass burning, less wretched than the fate of Frankenstein. Creature, amen, thyself and thou lovest consign, to vengeful wrath within my bosom churning, behold thy creature, monstrous and malign. So creature and creator both resign themselves to darkness whence is no returning. Aye, wretched is the fate of Frankenstein, and of his creature monstrous and malign. Quite fun, though I think fits the spirit of Frankenstein quite well.
Yeah.
So let's see here. Let's expand it out. Rich has been talking about his stories, as has Miss Freeman. So you said that Lou's story was a you chose, even though it didn't quite fit the themes. I've mentioned his description of it in the earlier in the stream. But what drew you to it?
To lose?
Yeah, Lou Antonelli's.
Oh, I don't believe that I said it didn't really fit, did I?
He said it didn't really fit,
Oh,
but
he said it didn't really fit.
abject bribery. Yep, that's fine too. I can be bribed.
Bribery. I don't know. He's a good writer. So, and like I said, I came dreadfully unprepared, and I apologize. But a lot of the stories have kind of mushed themselves together in my head at this point.
No, that's perfectly fine. So, all of us here seem to be working on our.
I could grab the book quick, and then I can crib in between.
Absolutely. I have a copy of the book myself. I'll unscreen and show you my Brobdingian figures, however you say that word. But I've got it right here. Delightful, delicious. Oh, perfect literature for an afternoon's clubbing.
Calm down.
No, never.
Okay. Lou wrote the ghost spots. Well,
That's
it
right.
had to do with Jupiter because they went out to Jupiter.
Yep.
So thematically, it wasn't the so close, but geographically, it was.
Mm-hmm. That's as good as reason as anything. So going in, let's see here. We've talked about stories. We've talked about going in and editing or anything like that. And we've read one of the stories. Lou Antonelli says, "That's my story and I'm sticking to it." Absolutely. One should always stick to their stories.
Otherwise, your stories might stick to you.
That's true. That's true. You never know what will haunt you in the middle of the night, or come back in a dark coat and stab you in an alley after destroying your life in a systematic fashion.
There you go.
Frankenstein reference. Dab. So coming back from LibertyCon, how do you think people have received it so far, those that we sold physical copies to? Have you gotten any feedback yet?
I really haven't. Not at all.
Okay.
Most people need time to read some or something. That's not helpful. I'm not helpful.
It's all right. You know, it's like here's the thing. I've invited people into my room. We can talk about things. We don't really have to talk about it, but it's really to talk about it. Let's see here.
I was just happy Julie took my story because it was such a monster. I didn't realize how big it was until after I sent it in. I was looking at it one more time. I'm like, man, that thing is too big. I don't know. I don't know if it'll get in just because it takes up so much space. So
It's only 30 pages.
only 30, yeah. My whole
Only
book by itself.
Yours wasn't the only long one. That's one thing I would do differently. To be honest, is I would put a lower word count limit and stick to it.
Ah.
So and I did read all of these, you know.
It's JD Beckwith. Hey, JD Beckwith, you're invited too.
Oh, is the Calhounian here?
Yeah, I did. I really kind of felt bad after I saw the first PDF that they sent out, and I'm like, 30 pages. Oy.
I'm pretty sure mine's one of those longer ones. It's like
It
1,200 words. Yeah. That was when I first started writing short stories a little more consistently. So it was before I learned how to shorten short stories.
I'm still not there. In fact, I
Hard.
barely write any short stories. I only write them on command, and then I just abandon them, like Frankenstein. Now it's in my head. I'm going to be using it for everything.
They're like breaking them.
Master, but I'm full of metaphors. Get back in the basement.
So
I wrote you for Uranus, and they didn't want you. Master.
oh, I hope JD manages to log in. That would be great.
I'll bully him.
Yeah, his story was connected to some other stories that he's written that I haven't read. And I know that a lot of the authors did do that, and the stories go with their science fiction world that they're writing in, or something like that. Maybe has Richard, you've done that, haven't you?
Mine's more a similar theme that runs through all of my short stories that I submitted to the anthology series. It's always kind of a last human kind of theme.
Mine's definitely a connected timeline over generations, so it's somewhat connected.
As weird as this sounds, my author bios are connected, and they get weirder and progressively weirder. And then eventually, there are so many clones of me running around, they gather up in one place and collapse into a black hole.
I thought about doing something with my bios like that, but I didn't plan for it, so it didn't happen.
Does anyone have any last questions or anything for Lou Antonelli? I guess not. I'm going to ask him if he has. Oh, it's JD Beckwith.
All right.
Oh, looks like Richard is also busy. I'm ask him if he has. Oh, it's JD Beckwith.
All right.
It's me. Oh, looks like Richard is also busy.
Yeah, I am being summoned by the boss. So.
It's me. All right, no, that's fine. You have a good one, JD. Yeah, just mute your YouTube.
You guys too.
It's a pleasure to have you both on, and I hope you both have the best of luck and health and all that good stuff, and that we may meet in the person sometime in the future. Lou says, "Have a good week." Thank you. You too, sir. And Richard says, "Good night, everyone." Excellent. So hopefully JD comes back in. But to prime us a bit, well, what's JD's story?
Watch where you stick your Grungnir.
Gungnir?
Yeah.
That's Odin's spear, for anyone wondering. And Bradford Walker has just come in, and we're finally getting popular with all total of three watchers.
Yeah.
Come in, and we're finally getting popular. JD, mute your YouTube. 3 watchers. Like the Hangout is fine. Just click mute on the YouTube. I need to get into contact with Bradford because he actually released his story, and I've promised him a live stream. So what's next for Julie Pascal?
What's next? I'm working on what I'm writing for myself, trying to put something together. It's it's a little iffy talking about it because then if I don't follow through, then everybody's like, hey, what were you doing? What you talking about? But I'm working on it going forward. I'm not planning any other editing at the moment, but
okay, that's perfectly reasonable.
There's always the day job too. So
yeah.
I have a day job.
I mean, I manage a gym. I call myself the gym leader, and I, verbally talk to people and tell them to clean treadmills that I told them to clean an hour ago. It's great. And I guess we know that the Mad Cow will be publishing other short stories for all the anthology pieces. JD, let's hear your melodious voice.
Well, is it working?
It is working, sir, and I don't hear myself, which is such a pity.
I apologize for the technical difficulties there. It was definitely operator error.
That's perfectly fine, sir. Why don't you start to close us out with looks like Mrs. The Mad Cow has left us. Oh no, she's back with your story, sir, and tell us about it and how it works with the themes of authority, leadership, and fatherhood.
Sure. Well, the story I've got in the Jupiter Anthology is called "Be Careful Where You Poke Your Gungnir." It starts off with a very forceful leadership issue going on in the space station that's orbiting Callisto.
Mm-hmm.
And basically telling an entrepreneur of space exploration tells a bureaucrat exactly where to go. And following that, there is a little bit of a calamitous uproar in the process that he's trying to do on the surface of the moon, which is in the middle of Valhalla Crater. I won't spoil any more of it, but adventures begin. The theme of it, obviously, being around Jupiter itself. The theme is he is the leader who is pushing forward into space, whether the rest of them like it or not. It was funny that I heard this mentioned a couple times during LibertyCon. There were several mentions of how the pioneers that moved west were tough people, and people died in the process of doing things. Well, that's kind of the way things go in this one. It's dangerous. Being on the edge of the new frontier and pushing forward for the benefit of humanity is going to be a dangerous thing.
Of course.
If we go to Mars, it's going to be dangerous. Chances are people are going to die. Humanity has become soft and squishy, and nobody really wants to think about things like that. But we lost astronauts during the Apollo mission.
Oh, don't worry. We won't be soft and squishy for long. Not long at all, I don't think. But keep going.
That's essentially that and the whole bureaucratic everybody on Earth thinks that the governments of Earth own space, but the people who are out there trying to actually claim space basically throw their finger up at them and say, "What are you going to do about it?"
Right? Like once you're on Mars and once you're set up as a colony, and it's like, but we have an international treaty. Oh, you have an international one and not an interplanetary treaty? Yeah. Oh.
Good for you.
Yeah, I hereby claim the moon for Superversive, just so you know.
Oh, thank you so much. I'll immediately shoot myself out of a cannon. And you know, I don't know.
FAL, man.
Exactly. And with luck, I'll slam into the Soviet colony that's surely up there, still keeping the communist dream alive, and proceed to, I don't know, do something. Starve to death, probably.
Take extra air tanks.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I almost forgot. So it sounds like you've got a really great story, as are all the stories in this anthology. I enjoyed that poetry I read, and I read the beginning of Lou's story, which looked to be quite interesting, actually. Let's sort of go around and give us a final word. I'm so sorry, JD, coming in here, but you did talk about your story.
Slipped in the last minute.
Hey,
Good.
that's okay, sir. Mrs. Oh my goodness, I keep forgetting what I'm supposed to. Anyway, the mad cow.
With the mad cow.
Yeah, there we go. Would you give us a final word for yourself?
Let's see. Moo, 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 moo. And go buy this anthology because it sounds awesome.
Oh, yes. Mr. Beckwith, would you give us the pleasure?
Well, I was still translating. Yeah.
It's okay.
Anthologies. I'm behind schedule. I've read the first 2, and there are 3 more. Everything I've read, and every one of them have been great. Anyone out there listening to it, if you don't buy these things, you're doing yourself a disservice if you like science fiction and fantasy and any mix of small genre horror type things. It's a mix of everything. They're great, and I highly, highly recommend it.
Absolutely. I myself have several stories that will be coming out soon. I hope in Neptune, but certainly in Saturn, Mercury, Mars, Luna, and Sol. Mrs. Pascal, would you give us the honor of closing us out with a final word on the anthology?
Okay. I really think this anthology turned out fabulously, and I couldn't have asked for better stories, and I'm confident that there's something that will appeal, and just check it out.
Absolutely. Do check it out. I have the links below. And you can always check out our Superversive blog and all the other places on the internet for our products, other anthologies, and something that you probably didn't expect to read, but will enjoy anyway. As always, on a Sunday around 5 p.m. Central Time, this is Ben Wheeler, the leading voice of Victorian-era Arabian Nights science fiction, signing off and wishing you a good one.